everyone, my name is Taylor Bush, and today I will be presenting the review of L'Oreal's life cycle assessment. Here's a presentation overview. So first, I will be giving you an introduction to this life cycle assessment, or LCA. I will identify a learning objective for people watching this presentation. I will show you the life cycle stages that L'Oreal presented in their document, as well as the environmental impact factors they considered, how they normalized and weighed those factors, their results, and their scoring principles. And then I will end with some conclusions and discussion points. So students watching this should be able to identify the main environmental impact categories that contribute to the overall environmental impact of L'Oreal's cosmetic products and how this can be communicated to consumers once the presentation is over. So some introduction, this LCA identifies the motivations as marketing as well as an internal motivation. So they do want to market the results to consumers in some type of deliverable label on their products. And then they also want this to be used as an internal tool for product managers to assess sustainable progress, as well as making decisions for formula and packaging. They did use a cradle to grave analysis, so looking at a product from the extraction of raw materials all the way to the disposal or recycle process of the products. This was done by using database information from 2018 that they have of over 6,000 L'Oreal products. And they further defined their motivation in these two statements listed, that by 2020, they would use innovative technologies to have new or renovated products to improve their environmental and social footprint, and that they would use this tool to communicate results to consumers to empower them to make sustainable consumption choices. Here's the breakdown that L'Oreal gave of how they categorize their products, because they do provide a multitude of cosmetic products, from hair care, skin care, makeup. And this cosmetic product is defined as the formula, the packaging, and as well as any accessories, not including electronic accessories. They seem to have defined their functional unit as footprint per user dose. I will go into more detail of what footprints, but it comes down to carbon footprint and water footprint. And then also overall environmental impact per 10 milliliters or 1 milliliter of formula. They also have a lot of work to do as far as characterization. So the darker boxes are the currently defined characterized segments. And then the lighter boxes in the bluish gray are ones that still need clear definitive definitions to have full analysis of. This is the life cycle stages that L'Oreal looked at for their cradle to grave analysis. So you can see they start from formula ingredient extraction through the production and distribution and storage stages, as well as the product use, and then ultimate recycling and disposable or recharge as well, which is something that L'Oreal pointed out, that they want to make their products more recyclable and rechargeable so that they could actually refill packaging with formula. I appreciate that they showed transportation as a component in between every life cycle stage. These are the environmental impact categories that they considered during this assessment. The categories seen here have multiple environmental impact factors within them. And I think this is a good organization tool so that they break down their considerations as they go from environmental impact categories to actual individual factors to make sure they're refining their assessment and considering all the details that they want. Here are the actual 14 environmental impact factors that are within those different categories. So this first column here, you can see all 14, and these weren't chosen at random. They were based on the European Commission's product environmental footprint guidelines, as well as the product environmental footprint category rules. And some of them were adapted to be better suited for cosmetic products, like looking at ecotoxicity of fresh water and then also water scarcity. I want to highlight that they identified the units for each of these factors as well, which I think is important. And you might recognize some of them from class, like for climate change, having kilograms of CO2 equivalent. After they define these characters or these factors, they normalized them into a single footprint that can be combined. So first, each factor is normalized into a unitless value that will eventually be added up for the impacts of the overall environmental footprint of a finished product. And these values were determined according to the European Commission Joint Research Center and the European Domestic Impacts per Person. Next, those factors were then weighted according to their relative criticality to the environmental impact. So this is determined by previous work that identified the planetary boundaries, so taking into consideration Earth's thresholds. I highlighted the top 4, and you can see that, for instance, climate change went from being kilograms CO2 equivalent per person to being 25.47% weighted of the overall environmental impact. This pie chart is how they chose to show the results of those weighted environmental impact factor percentages. And it's surprisingly broken down into just 3 categories. The first is the product water footprint at 52%. And this is a combination of 5 environmental impact factors that they consider to be contributing to the water footprint of their products, which is water scarcity, water eutrophication, marine eutrophication, water ecotoxicity, and water acidification. This category is expressed as the user dose of the product per represented volume in milliliters of the product in order to compare different user doses within the same product category. Next, we have the carbon footprint category at 14%, and this is defined as the carbon footprint of the finished product in kilograms of CO2 equivalent along the entire life cycle. And this is measured ultimately in kilogram CO2 equivalent per user dose and per representative volume in milliliters of the product. The last section here is the others category at 34%. So this is the 8 other environmental impact factors that were not a part of carbon footprint and water footprint. So based on this chart, L'Oreal has chosen to communicate the carbon footprint and water footprint on their consumer labels. And they also addressed that they felt that the carbon footprint and water footprint met the consumer needs for making sustainable purchase decisions. They decided to communicate these results further through a scoring system. This scoring system is got categories A, B, C, D, and E. So category A is defined as the 10% of products with the lowest footprint per dose. And E is the 10% with the highest footprint per dose. And then the categories B, C, and D were just fixed intervals in between. You can see here on this bar graph that categories C and D had the highest percentage of L'Oreal products within them out of those 6,000 that were looked at. This is an example of the label that they would give using this scoring system and the results of their analysis. So you can see on the bottom left corner, this example product has a score of B, and it shows where that lies on the carbon and water footprint scale. And then it has these other sections to the side. First, we have this section of manufacturing conditions. The manufacturing conditions are considered if a site is continuously reducing its CO2 emissions, water consumption, and waste production, as well as contributing to local employment. So this is quantified as the waste recovery and quantified as the renewable energy sourced during the manufacturing process. The next section is the environmental impact of the packaging, which is broken down into 2 quantitative percentages and as well as 2 yes or no categories. So you have the cardboard and paper category, which is defined with the FCS and PEFC, which is the Forest Stewardship Council and the Program for Endorsement of Forest Certification. And this just tells you how much of the materials by percentage are made from responsibly managed forests where biodiversity is protected. And then you also have the percentage of the bottle or the packaging made of recycled material. If this is recyclable, yes or no, based on local recyclable capabilities. And then if this package is refillable or rechargeable. Lastly, we have this section of social impact. This category explains how well the product follows the 4 principles of the UN Global Compact on labor rights, which is the rights of workers to associate freely and engage in collective bargaining, no forced or compulsory labor and no child labor, and no discrimination among workers. Compliance to these principles was determined by the supplier's commitment to the Solidarity Sourcing Project. So some closing discussion points are that the marketing motivation was very clear throughout this LCA, how they wanted to use these results to communicate sustainable choices to consumers was very clear. But the point of using this as a tool for internal product manager decisions was not very clear. It wasn't stated throughout the document. And also, I think the numerical data was lacking in order for this to be an internal tool. I do like their choice of communicating the impacts. I think that was reasonable. Their choice to use carbon and water footprint. As a consumer of makeup myself, it would catch my eye to see that on a label, and I would feel better using that to make my decisions. That being said, I think the pie chart that they gave could have had more detail. The others category did not have the other sections listed out, which I was curious to see. They were also not described in detail in the text. So if it was a resolution issue of having them all in one pie chart, they could have made an others pie chart on its own. I think they also relied too heavily on the percentages rather than listing out the exact findings. So listing out the carbon footprint in kilograms equivalent of CO2 per person was never done. They mostly portrayed the percentages that they found. And that leads into, I wish there was more mathematics and modeling here, but I also understand that this is the makeup industry, so that might not have been as well suited. They did cite all of the modeling and like the modeling that they used, as well as the procedures and standards that they were trying to meet. And then the A through E scoring system, it does have some inherent bias because it has to be updated frequently as their number of products are analyzed and their products are improved, because that 10% threshold is going to change. So it could be misleading to consumers because it's just comparing L'Oreal products to L'Oreal products, which is also beneficial, but it doesn't compare L'Oreal products to, say, another company. So I think that that's something that could have been better communicated on the label or during the LCA. Thank you for your time and attention. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed gaining some insight into the makeup industry's environmental impacts. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at the email below, taylorbush3@unm.edu. Here is the reference of the LCA I reviewed. Thank you.